The space station spun slowly against the black stars. It was called Harmony's Edge, and it looked like a giant metal flower with 12 petals. Each petal belonged to a different alien race. The human section was the smallest one. Captain Jake. Morrison straightened his formal blue uniform and checked his reflection in the mirror. His black hair was perfectly combed. His shoes were polished until they shined. He looked like a picture from a textbook about proper military officers. "Sir, the council meeting starts in 10 minutes, said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. She was young and smart, with brown hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a thick book about alien customs and rules. Jake nodded. "Remember, Amy, speak slowly. Use big words. Never interrupt them when they talk. And for heaven's sake, don't mention anything about our history with wars." Amy flipped through her book. "The Villani like compliments about their art. The Zephyrians want us to discuss philosophy. The Korvathi expect us to bow when we see them." "Right. And what do we never talk about? Sports, fighting, competition, weapons, or anything that might remind them we used to have wars on Earth." Jake smiled, but it looked tired. "Good girl. Let's go pretend to be civilized." They walked through the station's long white hallways. Other aliens passed them by. The Villani moved like dancers, their blue skin shimmering under the lights. They wore flowing robes that changed colors as they walked. One of them looked at Jake and Amy like they were children playing dress-up. The Zephyrians floated past without touching the ground. Their large heads pulsed with soft light as they thought their deep thoughts. They never looked directly at humans. Jake had heard one of them say that humans were intellectually limited last week. The worst were the Korvathi. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. They had been traveling space for thousands of years before humans even invented the wheel. They acted like they owned the galaxy. The council chamber was huge and round. Each race had their own section with chairs that fit their bodies. The human section had simple metal chairs that looked cheap compared to the others. The Villani sat on floating cushions that played soft music. The Zephyrians didn't need chairs at all. Jake and Amy took their seats. Jake put on his best smile and waited. Elder Threnin of the Korvathi stood up. He was their leader and the oldest being in the room. His forearms moved as he talked, like he was conducting an orchestra. "Welcome, friends, to another gathering of civilized minds," he said. His voice was deep and smooth. "Today we discuss the trade routes through the Kepler system. This requires careful thought and wisdom." The meeting went on for hours. Each race took turns speaking about trade laws and shipping routes. They used fancy words and long sentences. They quoted ancient philosophers and old laws. Jake nodded and smiled and said things like, "How wise and very thoughtful." When it was humanity's turn to speak, Jake stood up carefully. "The human delegation appreciates this opportunity to learn from such advanced civilizations. We humbly suggest that the new trade routes could benefit everyone if we work together in peace and understanding." Some of the aliens nodded politely. Others looked bored. Jake sat down, feeling like a student who had just given a book report. After the meeting, there was a cultural exchange ceremony. This was the part Jake hated most. Each race would show off their art, music, or poetry. Humans always went last, and their presentations always seemed simple compared to the others. The Villani performed a dance that told the story of their planet's creation. Colors swirled around them like living rainbows. Everyone clapped politely. The Zephyrians shared a piece of music that existed only in their minds. They all glowed brighter as the song played in their heads. The other aliens closed their eyes and pretended to understand it. The Korvathi recited an ancient poem about the birth of wisdom. It went on for 20 minutes and had words that didn't exist in any human language. Everyone nodded like it was the most beautiful thing they had ever heard. Then it was humanity's turn. Commander Lisa Parker stepped forward. She was a good officer with red hair and green eyes. She had practiced her presentation for weeks. "Humans would like to share a piece of music from our world," she said. "It represents our hope for peace among all races." She pressed a button on her device. Soft piano music filled the room. It was beautiful and gentle, chosen specifically because it wouldn't remind anyone of human conflicts or emotions that were too strong. The music played for 3 minutes. When it ended, polite clapping echoed through the chamber. Elder Threnon stood up slowly, his forearms crossed in front of his chest. "How quaint," he said, his voice carried across the quiet room. "It is remarkable how these barely domesticated primates continue to play at civilization." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Every alien in the chamber turned to look at the humans. Some looked embarrassed. Others tried to hide smiles. A few just stared. Jake felt his face turn red. Amy's hands clenched into fists. Lisa Parker stood frozen at the front of the room, her device still in her hand. Elder Threnon continued, his voice calm and educational. "Of course we must be patient with younger races. It has only been a few centuries since humans stopped killing each other with primitive weapons. We cannot expect them to understand true culture overnight." The chamber was completely silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. 30 years of careful diplomacy. 30 years of choosing every word carefully. 30 years of pretending to be something they weren't. And this is what they got. Lisa Parker walked back to her seat. Her face was white, but she kept her head up. Jake wanted to say something, but what could he say? Everything Elder Threnon had said was technically true. Humans had fought wars. They were the newest race in the Council. They were still learning. But something deep inside Jake's chest was burning. Something that had been sleeping for 30 years was starting to wake up. The meeting ended with more polite words and fake smiles. The aliens filed out of the chamber, talking quietly among themselves. Jake caught fragments of their conversations. Poor things, they try so hard. Give them another century, perhaps. At least they're house-trained now. Jake and Amy walked back to the human section in silence. When they reached Jake's office, he closed the door and sat down hard in his chair. "Sir?" Amy said quietly. Jake stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there were billions of humans who had no idea that their representatives were being treated like trained pets. "Amy," Jake said slowly, "send a message to Admiral Stevens on Earth, Priority 1. Tell him we need to talk." Amy nodded and left the room. Jake sat alone in the dark, listening to the station's quiet hum. The burning feeling in his chest was getting stronger. For 30 years, humanity had been good. They had been polite. They had been civilized. Maybe it was time to try something different. Admiral Paul Stevens sat in his office on Earth, watching the recording for the 5th time. The insult from Elder Threnon played again on his screen. Barely domesticated primates playing at civilization. Paul was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his younger days in the military. He had fought in the last war before humanity joined the galactic community. He remembered what humans were like when they stopped being polite. The door opened and General Susan Clark walked in. She was tall and thin with short black hair and cold blue eyes. Behind her came Dr. Kevin Wright, the head of Alien Relations, and Colonel Diana Foster, who ran Earth's intelligence service. "Have you all seen it?" Paul asked. They nodded. Susan's jaw was tight with anger. Kevin looked embarrassed. Diana just looked thoughtful. 30 years, Susan said. 30 years of teaching our people to bow and scrape and smile. 30 years of pretending we're ashamed of what we are. And this is what we get. Kevin adjusted his glasses. We knew this might happen. The older races have always looked down on us. We just need to be patient and prove ourselves over time. Diana laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Patient? Kevin, they just called us trained animals on a broadcast that went to every world in the galaxy. How much more patient do you want us to be? Paul leaned back in his chair. I've been thinking about this all night. What if we're doing this wrong? The others looked at him. What if trying to be like them is the mistake? What if we should just be ourselves? Susan smiled for the first time in days. You mean stop pretending? I mean stop apologizing for being human. Kevin looked worried. Sir, If we change our approach now, we could lose our seat on the council. We could lose all our trade agreements. The other races might see us as dangerous. Good, Paul said. Maybe it's time they remembered why that might be true. He pressed a button on his desk. Get me Jake Morrison at Harmony's Edge. The screen flickered and Jake's face appeared. He looked tired and angry. Admiral, Jake said, I was hoping you'd call. Jake, I want you to try something different. Next time you go to a council meeting, don't wear the fancy uniform. Wear your regular clothes. Don't use big words. Just talk like a normal person. Jake raised an eyebrow. Sir, that goes against everything we've been taught about alien diplomacy. I know, I'm changing the rules. If they want to see uncivilized, maybe we should show them what that really looks like. 2 days later, Jake walked into the council chamber, wearing simple black pants and a gray shirt. His hair was still neat, but not perfect. Amy walked beside, him in casual clothes too. She had stopped carrying the book about alien customs. The other aliens stared. Elder Threnon's forearms made a gesture that meant disapproval in his culture. Captain Morrison, Threnon said, surely you are aware that council meetings require proper formal attire. Jake sat down in his chair and put his feet up on the table. Yeah, I know. I just don't care anymore. The chamber went silent. Several Villani stopped their dancing movements. The Zephyrian's headlights flickered with surprise. Excuse me? Threnon said. You heard me. I don't care about your dress code. I don't care about your fancy words. And I especially don't care about your opinion of my species. Jake looked around. The room. You want to know something funny? For 30 years we've been trying so hard to impress you. We changed how we talked, how we dressed, how we acted. We hid everything that made us human because we thought you might like us better. He stood up and walked to the center of the room. But you don't like us anyway. You think we're animals, you think we're stupid, you think we're dangerous. Well, guess what? You're right about the dangerous part. Elder Threnon's skin changed, color slightly. It was a sign of anger in his species. Captain Morrison, this behavior is completely inappropriate for a civilized gathering. Civilized? Jake laughed. You want to talk about civilized? Let me tell you what's not civilized. It's not civilized to insult someone's entire species in front of everyone. It's not civilized to treat people like pets. It's not civilized to act like bullies and then expect us to smile about it. A Villani delegate stood up. Her name was something Jake couldn't pronounce, so he just called her Blue Lady in his head. Captain, perhaps we should discuss this calmly and rationally. No, Jake said, I'm done being calm and rational. I'm done pretending to be something I'm not. You want to see what humans are really like? Fine. But don't come crying to us when you don't like what you see. The meeting fell apart after that. Aliens began talking among themselves in worried voices. Some left the chamber early. Jake and Amy walked out without saying goodbye. Back on Earth, Paul watched the news reports. The alien networks were calling it the human outburst and a diplomatic disaster. Human news channels were calling it something else entirely. They were calling it about time. Phone calls poured into military headquarters. Not complaints. Congratulations. Regular people from all over Earth were saying the same thing. Finally, someone had stood up for humanity. Colonel Diana Foster walked into Paul's office with a tablet full of data. Sir, you need to see this. The alien governments are having emergency meetings. They're calling Jake Morrison a rogue agent. They want us to remove him and apologize. Paul grinned. What did you tell them? I told them Jake Morrison speaks for all of humanity now. Good. What else? Well, the interesting thing is what they're not saying. They're not threatening to kick us out of the council. They're not canceling trade deals. They're just complaining. Susan walked in carrying a cup of coffee and looking happier than she had in years. The recruitment offices are seeing a lot of activity. Young people want to join the space service. They want to be like Jake Morrison. Paul nodded. Anything else? Diana smiled. The Korvathi ambassador on Earth requested a private meeting. He wants to discuss the situation. Tell him I'm busy, sir. Tell him I'm busy doing human things like not caring what he thinks. 3 days later, Jake got new orders from Earth. Instead of formal diplomatic instructions, Paul's message was simple. Be yourself. Do what you think is right. Stop asking permission to be human. Jake read the message twice, then deleted it. He looked out at the stars and felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years. He felt free. The next day, a crisis erupted in the Andromeda sector. The Hegemony, a group of 4 warlike alien races, was threatening to attack the peaceful Andromedans. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Elder Thrennen stood up with his usual ceremony. This situation requires careful deliberation and diplomatic wisdom. We must consider all options and find a peaceful solution that respects the rights of all parties. Jake stood up too. But instead of waiting for permission to speak, he just started talking. Or, he said, we could tell the Hegemony to back off or we'll make them back off. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Thrennen's 4 arms waved frantically. Captain Morrison, that is not how civilized beings solve conflicts. Jake looked at him with dead serious eyes. Elder Thrennen, with all due respect, we're not civilized beings. We're humans. And humans solve problems differently. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. The Andromedans are our friends. Anyone who attacks our friends attacks us. I thought you should know that before you waste any more time talking. Jake left the chamber and Amy followed him. Behind them, the council dissolved into chaos as aliens argued in a dozen different languages. The mask was off. Humanity had stopped pretending. And the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The Hegemony fleet moved through dark space like hungry sharks. 50 warships, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. They were heading straight for the Andromedan homeworld. Admiral Keth Moore commanded the fleet from his flagship. He was a Bruthan, a species that looked like armored lizards walking on 2 legs. The Bruthan loved war more than anything else. They had conquered 6 star systems in the past decade. The Andromedans have 12 hours to surrender, Keth Moore told his officers. After that, we take their world by force. The Andromedans were peaceful. They looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and large eyes. They had never fought a war in their entire history. Their ships were designed for exploration, not fighting. Everyone in the galaxy knew they would lose. On Harmony's edge, Jake Morrison watched the news reports. The Galactic Council was meeting, an emergency session, but they were only talking. Always talking, never doing. Sir, Amy said, Earth is sending ships. Jake looked at her. How many? 15 warships. Colonel Matt Johnson is leading them. 15 ships against 50? Jake laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Those are terrible odds. Should we tell them to wait for backup? Jake thought about the Andromedans. They had always been kind to humans. When humanity first joined the galactic community, the Andromedans had welcomed them with genuine friendship. No condescending smiles. No lectures about civilization. Just friendship? No, Jake said. Tell Matt to go fast, and tell him the rules have changed. Colonel Matt Johnson received the message on his flagship, the UES Defiance. He was a tough man with gray hair and a scar across his left cheek. He had fought in 3 wars before humans met aliens. Rules have changed? His second-in-command, Captain Ben Taylor, asked. Matt smiled grimly. It means we don't have to be polite anymore. The human fleet was small but fast. Their ships were built differently than alien vessels. Where alien ships were elegant and smooth, human ships looked like they were made for fighting. They were covered in armor plates and weapon mounts. They looked dangerous. Sir, Lieutenant Sarah Wilson called out from her station. We're getting a message from the Hegemony fleet. Put it on screen. Admiral Keth Moore's ugly face appeared on the monitor. His yellow eyes were full of contempt. Human ships, you are in violation of galactic law. This is a legitimate military action. Turn around and go home. Matt stood up slowly. He was wearing his combat uniform, not the fancy dress clothes human officers usually wore to talk with aliens. Admiral Keth Moore, this is Colonel Johnson. I'm ordering you to turn your fleet around and leave Andromedan space. Keth Moore laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. You dare give orders to the hegemony? You have 15 tiny ships. We have 50 battleships. Do you wish to die today, human? Matt's smile got wider. You know what, Admiral? I think you misunderstood something. We're not here to follow your rules. We're not here to be civilized. We're here to stop you from hurting our friends. And how do you plan to do that? The old-fashioned way. Matt cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All ships, battle stations. Rules of engagement are simple. Make them stop. Sir, Captain Taylor said. Should we hail them one more time? Give them a chance to surrender? No. They had their chance when I told them to leave. The human fleet moved forward. They didn't form the neat battle lines that alien races preferred. They didn't send formal challenges or exchange threats, they just attacked. The first human ship, the UES Hammer, rammed straight into a hegemony battleship at full speed. The alien ship's shields failed from the impact. Then the Hammer's crew did something no alien had ever seen before. They used their ship as a weapon, ramming again and again until both ships were destroyed. What are they doing? Kethmore screamed at his officers. That's suicide. But it wasn't suicide. It was strategy. While the hegemony fleet was shocked by the ramming attack, the other human ships spread out and hit them from all sides. The UES Storm used modified mining charges as weapons. They weren't designed for space combat, but they worked. When they exploded against alien hulls, the damage was terrible. Captain Sarah Kim commanded the UES Wildfire. Instead of fighting at long range like civilized species, she brought her ship in close and used welding torches as weapons. Her crew cut holes in enemy ships and boarded them. The boarding actions were the worst part for the aliens. Human Marines didn't fight like other species. They didn't use energy weapons in formal duels. They used whatever they could find. Wrenches, chairs, pieces of broken metal. They fought like wild animals. Lieutenant Sarah Wilson led a boarding party onto a hegemony cruiser. Her team didn't try to capture the bridge or engine room. They went straight to the cafeteria and started breaking things. When the alien crew tried to stop them, the humans threw furniture and food and anything else they could grab. This is insane, the ship's captain yelled. You can't fight like this. There are rules. Wilson hit him with a metal tray. Rules are for civilized people. We're just humans. Back on his flagship, Admiral Kethmore watched his fleet falling apart. 5 of his ships were already destroyed. 3 more were boarded by humans who were tearing them apart from the inside. The rest of his captains were calling for help. Sir? His aide said. Should we call for reinforcements? Kethmore looked at the tactical display. The human ships were outnumbered, but they were winning. They fought without honor, without rules, without mercy. They were everything the civilized galaxy had tried to forget about warfare. No, he said, quietly. Signal the fleet we're withdrawing. Sir? We still outnumber them 3-1. Look at the screen. Kethmore pointed at the battle. A human ship was using its cargo bay as a giant slingshot, firing pieces of debris at his battleships. Another human crew had somehow turned their waste disposal system into a weapon. They're not fighting to win, he said. They're fighting to hurt us as much as possible before they die. I've never seen anything like it. The hegemony fleet began to retreat. The human ships didn't chase them. They just watched them go, floating in space among the wreckage of what had been the galaxy's most feared military force. Colonel Johnson stood on his bridge, looking at the damage reports. He had lost 4 ships and 300 people. But the Andromedans were safe. Sir, Captain Taylor said, we're getting calls from news stations across the galaxy. They want to interview you about the battle. Tell them I'm busy. Doing what, sir? Johnson looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien races were probably having emergency meetings about what had just happened. They were probably scared. Good. Tell them I'm busy being uncivilized. On Harmony's Edge, Jake Morrison watched the news reports with satisfaction. Every alien news channel was talking about the battle. They called it the Andromedan Incident, and the day warfare changed. Elder Threnon appeared on screen, giving an interview. His 4 arms moved nervously as he talked. This unprecedented display of barbarism shows why humans are not ready for civilized society. They fight without honor, without rules, without regard for proper military conduct. Jake turned off the screen and smiled. Let them talk. Let them complain. Let them be afraid. For the first time in 30 years, the galaxy was paying attention to humanity. Not because humans were trying to be like everyone else, but because they had finally stopped trying. The mask was completely off now, and the real show was just beginning. News of the Andromedan battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On every world, in every space station, aliens watched the recordings with horror and fascination. Humans had not just won against impossible odds. They had done it in ways that broke every rule of civilized warfare. Elder Threnin called an emergency meeting of the Corvathi High Council. The chamber was filled with the oldest and wisest members of his species. Their forearms moved in patterns of worry and confusion. Humans have revealed their true nature, Threnin said. They are as dangerous as we always suspected, perhaps more so. General Vex Kori, the military leader of the Corvathi, studied battle reports on his tablet. Their tactics make no sense from a strategic standpoint. They sacrificed ships unnecessarily. They used suicidal attacks. They fought like berserkers, not soldiers. And yet they won, another council member pointed out. Exactly, Threnin said. This is why we must teach them proper military conduct. We challenge them to a war game. We show them how civilized races conduct warfare. We demonstrate the superiority of Corvathi strategy and tactics. The council agreed. Within days, they sent a formal challenge to Earth. The message was polite but condescending. The Corvathi would honor humanity with a lesson in proper military science. General Rick Martinez read the challenge in his office on Mars. He was a stocky man with dark skin and intelligent eyes. He had been planning military operations since he was 20 years old. Now he was 50, and he was very good at his job. They want to teach us how to fight? He asked his aide, Major Tony Garcia. That's what it says, sir. A formal war game. No real weapons. Computer simulations and practice. Battles. They want to show us the correct way to conduct military operations. Rick laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. Tony, do you know what this is? Sir, this is like a shark offering to teach a wolf how to hunt. Rick sent back a simple reply. Challenge accepted. See you next month. The war games took place in the neutral zone, a region of space where different species could meet safely. The Corvathi brought their finest military minds and their most advanced simulation equipment. Everything was neat, organized, and proper. The humans brought General Martinez and a small team of officers. They showed up in casual uniforms and boots that looked like they had seen real combat. Supreme Commander Thex Vori led the Corvathi team. He was ancient even by their standards, with pale gray skin and eyes that had seen 1,000 battles. He greeted Martinez with the formal bow that Corvathi tradition required. General Martinez, we are honored to share our wisdom with your species. Today you will learn how warfare is properly conducted among civilized races. Martinez nodded politely. Looking forward to it, Commander. The first simulation was a classic battle scenario. 2 fleets meet in open space. The goal was to defeat the enemy while minimizing losses. The Corvathi had done this simulation thousands of times. Commander Thex Vori explained the rules carefully. Ships moved in formation. Attacks followed specific patterns. There were protocols for surrender, retreat, and negotiation during combat. Do you understand the parameters? He asked Martinez. Sure, Martinez said. One question, though. What happens if we don't follow the rules? I beg your pardon? What if we just ignore all those protocols and fight our own way? Thex Vori's forearms made a gesture of confusion. But then it would not be a proper military exercise. There would be chaos. Martinez smiled. Exactly. The simulation began. The Corvathi fleet moved in perfect formation, like a dance that had been practiced for centuries. Their ships advanced in neat lines, firing in coordinated volleys. The human fleet scattered in all directions. What are they doing? Thex Vori asked his tactical officer. I don't know, sir. They're not following any known battle formation. Some human ships pretended to retreat, drawing Corvathi vessels out of formation. Others hid behind asteroids and attacked from ambush. One group of human ships started broadcasting false distress signals, trying to trick the Korvathi into thinking they were damaged. But the worst part was the psychological warfare. Human ships sent messages to individual Korvathi captains, telling them that their commanders were incompetent. They spread rumors about secret weapons. They even sent fake surrender offers that turned into surprise attacks. "This is not how military exercises are conducted," HFY protested. "Why not?" Martinez asked. "Is there a rule that says we have to make it easy for you?" The Korvathi fleet fell apart. Their careful formations broke down as captains began to doubt their orders. Ships started acting independently instead of as a coordinated force. Within 2 hours, the simulation showed a complete Korvathi defeat. HFY stared at the results in disbelief. "This is impossible. We have superior numbers, superior technology, superior strategy." "Yeah," Martinez said, "but we have superior unpredictability. Your problem is that you're too civilized. You follow rules even when the rules don't make sense." They ran the simulation again. This time, the Korvathi tried to adapt to human tactics. But every time they thought they understood what the humans were doing, the humans changed their approach. In the third simulation, human forces divided into tiny groups and attacked everywhere at once. In the fourth, they all concentrated on one target and overwhelmed it completely. In the fifth, they pretended to fight each other, confusing the Korvathi into thinking there was a civil war in the human fleet. After 6 defeats, HFY called a break. He gathered his staff in private. "They don't fight like any species we've encountered," he told them. "They have no consistent doctrine, no predictable patterns. How do we counter an enemy that has no logical strategy?" "Perhaps that is their strategy, sir," suggested his aide. "Perhaps chaos itself is their plan." Meanwhile, Martinez was talking to his own team. "This is almost too easy. They're so stuck in their ways they can't adapt when someone does something unexpected." "Should we ease up on them, sir?" asked Major Garcia. "Hell no. They wanted to teach us a lesson. Now they're getting one." The war games continued for 3 days. The Korvathi lost every single simulation. Worse, their defeats became more and more embarrassing as human creativity found new ways to break their careful plans. On the final day, Martinez introduced something completely new. Instead of fighting a space battle, he suggested a ground combat scenario. "We will simulate the defense of a civilian population," he explained. "Your forces will try to capture a city. Our forces will try to stop you." HFY agreed, confident that ground combat would follow more predictable rules. He was wrong. The human defenders didn't stay in their assigned positions. They didn't hold defensive lines. Instead, they scattered throughout the city and started what they called urban warfare. Human soldiers hid in buildings and ambushed Korvathi patrols. They used the civilian population as cover, making it impossible for the Korvathi to use heavy weapons. They set traps in sewers and subways. They even recruited simulated civilians to act as spies and saboteurs. "This is not acceptable," HFY declared. "You cannot use non-combatants in military operations." "Why not?" Martinez asked. "If someone invaded your homeworld, wouldn't your people help fight them off?" "That's different. This is a military exercise with established parameters." "No," Martinez said quietly. "This is a lesson. You wanted to teach us how civilized races fight wars. Well, here's something for you to think about. When you're fighting for your home, for your family, for everything you care about, civilization becomes a luxury you can't afford." The simulation ended with complete human victory. The Korvathi forces had been forced to withdraw from the city after taking massive casualties while accomplishing none of their objectives. HFY sat in silence for a long time after the final results were announced. Finally, he looked at Martinez with something that might have been respect. "General, your forces are effective, but surely you understand that such tactics would be considered war crimes by galactic law?" Martinez stood up and gathered his equipment. "Commander, there's something you need to understand about humans. We spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever met aliens. We got very good at it. When we joined your galactic community, We agreed to follow your rules. But you just spent 3 days insulting us and trying to prove we were inferior. He headed toward the door, then stopped and looked back. You wanted to see what uncivilized looks like. This was us being gentle. Next time, maybe you should think twice before challenging a species that turned warfare into an art form. The Korvathi sat alone in their command center, staring at simulation results that made no sense according to everything they had been taught about military science. For the first time in their long history, they were afraid of a younger species, and they were right to be afraid. 6 months after the war games, the galaxy was a different place. News reports across all alien networks talked about the same thing. Humans had changed, and nobody knew what to do about it. Ambassador Claire Peterson walked into the Galactic Council chamber wearing simple black pants and a white shirt. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried no books about alien customs and no notes about proper behavior. She didn't need them anymore. The council chamber looked the same as always, but everything felt different. When Claire entered, conversation stopped. Aliens who used to ignore humans now watched her carefully. The Villani delegates whispered among themselves. The Zephyrian's headlights pulsed nervously. Elder Threnon sat in his usual place, but he looked older than before. His gray skin was paler, and his forearms moved less confidently. The humiliation of the war games had affected him deeply. Claire took her seat and waited. She didn't stand up to greet the other delegates. She didn't bow or make formal gestures. She just sat there like she owned the place. The council will now address recent events in human space, announced the session moderator, a tall blue alien whose name Claire had never bothered to learn. Several reports were read aloud. Human colonies were expanding faster than ever before. Human trade ships were taking business away from alien merchants by offering better deals and faster service. Human scientists were making discoveries that challenged alien theories. Most concerning to the Council was human military activity. After the Andromedan battle and the Korvathi war games, human forces were being deployed across the galaxy. Not for conquest, but for protection. Species that had never asked for help before were quietly requesting human security assistance. Ambassador Peterson, the moderator said, the Council is concerned about these developments. Human behavior has become unpredictable. Claire stood up slowly. Unpredictable? I think we've been pretty clear about what we're doing. We're being ourselves. A Villani delegate floated forward. But Ambassador, surely you understand that your recent actions violate the spirit of galactic cooperation. The use of aggressive tactics, the disregard for established protocols. Let me stop you right there, Claire said. For 30 years, humanity tried to play by your rules. We dressed how you wanted us to dress. We talked how you wanted us to talk. We pretended to be ashamed of our history and our nature. And what did we get for it? She looked around the chamber. We got treated like children. We got condescended to. We got insulted on live broadcasts. Well, guess what? We're done with that. Elder Threnon slowly rose to his feet. His voice was quieter than usual. Ambassador Peterson, perhaps there has been some misunderstanding. The Council has always valued human contributions to galactic society. Claire laughed, and it wasn't a polite diplomatic laugh. Really? Is that what you call it when you said we were barely domesticated primates? The chamber fell silent. Every alien present remembered that moment. It had been broadcast to every world in the galaxy. That comment, Threnon said carefully, was perhaps poorly chosen. I did not intend to cause offense. Oh, you didn't cause offense, Claire said. You did something much more important. You reminded us who we really are. She walked to the center of the chamber, just like Jake Morrison had done months before. But where Jake had been angry, Claire was calm and confident. You see, Elder Threnon, you were right about us being primates. You just forgot what that means. Primates are survivors. We adapt, we fight, we never give up. We built civilization by being too stubborn to die. She turned to address the entire council. For millions of years, my species lived on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, ice ages, asteroid impacts. And you know what we did? We didn't just survive. We thrived. We conquered our entire planet. We reached for the stars. A Zephyrian delegate floated forward, its head pulsing with nervous light. But surely, Ambassador, you agree that civilization requires moving beyond such primitive instincts? No, Claire said simply. I don't. Those instincts are what make us strong. You all spent so much time becoming civilized that you forgot how to solve real problems. She pulled out a tablet and read from it. In the past 6 months, human forces have stopped 3 pirate fleets that your combined navies couldn't catch. Human negotiators have ended 2 trade wars that your diplomats had been arguing about for years. Human scientists have solved medical problems that your researchers said were impossible. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Aliens began arguing among themselves in a dozen different languages. Claire waited for the noise to die down, then continued. And you know what the funny part is? We did all of this by doing exactly what you said we shouldn't do. We were aggressive. We were direct. We didn't follow your rules. And it worked. Elder Threnon's forearms trembled slightly. Ambassador, surely you do not suggest that might makes right. No, Claire said. I suggest that effectiveness makes right. Your way of doing things doesn't work. Our way does. The galaxy is safer, more prosperous, and more peaceful since we stopped pretending to be like you. She walked back toward her seat, then stopped and looked back at Threnon. You know what the really funny part is, Elder? We were trying to be polite. All those years of formal speeches and diplomatic protocols, we were holding back. We were trying not to scare you. And now? Threnon asked quietly. Claire smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized it was stronger than everything around it. Now we don't care if you're scared. In fact, maybe a little fear is exactly what this galaxy needed. The session ended in chaos. Delegates rushed out to send messages to their homeworlds. Emergency meetings were called. News networks went into overdrive. But Claire just sat in her chair and watched the panic with satisfaction. Her tablet buzzed with a message from Admiral Stevens on Earth. How did it go? She typed back. Mission accomplished. They're terrified. 2 hours later, Claire was in her office when the door chimed. Elder Threnon stood outside, alone. Ambassador, he said quietly, may I speak with you privately? Claire let him in. He looked around her office, taking in the simple furniture and the pictures of Earth on the walls. I came to apologize, he said. My comments about your species were inappropriate and untrue. No, Claire said. They were completely true. We are barely domesticated primates. The mistake you made was thinking that was a weakness. Threnon's forearms moved in a gesture of confusion. I do not understand. Elder, let me explain something about humans. We spent thousands of years fighting everything that tried to kill us. Other humans, wild animals, diseases, nature itself. We got very good at fighting, but more importantly, we learned that sometimes fighting is the only solution. She walked to her window and looked out at the stars. Your species has been civilized for so long that you've forgotten how to solve problems. You talk and debate and form committees. And while you're talking, bad things happen to good people. And humans prevent this how? Claire turned back to him. We punch the bad guys in the face until they stop being bad guys. Threnon was quiet for a long moment. And if the bad guys are stronger than you, then we punch them anyway, and hope we can take enough of them with us to matter. That is... Threnon paused, searching for words. That is terrifying. Good, Claire said. It should be. Because now you understand what happens when someone threatens our friends. Threnon bowed formally, all forearms moving in the gesture of deep respect. Ambassador Peterson, I believe I owe your species more than an apology. I believe we owe you our thanks. For what? For reminding us that sometimes civilization needs barbarians to protect it. After Threnon left, Claire sat alone in her office. Outside her window, ships from a dozen different species moved through space. Many of them now flew with human escorts. Not because they were forced to, but because they had asked for protection. Her tablet chimed with reports from across the galaxy. Human colonies were thriving. Human businesses were growing. Human military units were being requested by species that had never needed help before. The galaxy had learned what humanity was really like when they stopped pretending to be civilized. And despite their fears, most species had decided they liked the results. Claire opened a communication channel to Admiral Stevens. His face appeared on her screen, and he was smiling. "Claire, I just got the strangest message. The Korvathi are asking if we'd be interested in a formal military alliance. What did you tell them?" "I told them we'd think about it. After all, we wouldn't want to seem too eager." Claire laughed. "Paul, 30 years ago, we would have jumped at that offer. 30 years ago, we were trying to impress them. Now they're trying to impress us. Funny how things change when you stop apologizing for being yourself." Admiral Stevens nodded. The galaxy wanted to see what uncivilized looks like. Turns out uncivilized gets things done. Claire ended the call and looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, human ships were patrolling trade routes. Human diplomats were solving problems with direct action instead of endless debate. Human scientists were pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The terrible day when humanity stopped pretending to be cultured had become the best thing that ever happened to the galaxy. And everyone knew it, even if